nothing after I tell you to do something. Get over here. Come here. You sit over here. Get over there. You got an audience here, man. Get over there and sit down, man. No back talk out here. We don't play that here. Look at me. Look at me. We don't play that here. No back talk. If I tell you to do something, collapse. Now you sit all the way over here. My wall. Sit all the way over here. Look at y'all over here. All the way over here. All the way against the wall. So now again, why you want to punch that? Come on, man. Cut it. Move down. Move down. Move down. Move down. All right. Move down. Move down. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح
ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله Amma ba'd, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him, we seek His aid, we ask His forgiveness, we repent to Him, and we rely on Him. We seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the evil of our souls and our deeds. He whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided, no one can misguide. And he whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not guided, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his final messenger. يقول الله تعالى في محكم التنزيل أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك فاعف عنهم واستغفر لهم وشاورهم في الأمر فإذا عزمت فتوكل على الله إن الله يحب المتوكلين. As always, brothers and sisters, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us to witness this Jum'ah, for allowing us to be here today, for allowing us and blessing us to be amongst those who, insha'Allah, will receive the rewards that this great day has to offer us. We thank Him subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of His blessings, for He is the only one that is truly deserving of thanks. Brothers and sisters in faith, today I wanted to have a brief conversation with you regarding compassion. And I chose a verse from Surah Al-Imran, which is Surah 3, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, out of mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you were gentle in your dealings with them. And had you been harsh or hard-hearted, they would have dispersed and left you. So pardon them and ask forgiveness for them. Consult with them about matters. Then when you have decided on a course of action, put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who put their trust in Him. This verse, brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this verse, as I said, is from Surah Al-Imran, and the verse is verse 159, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by praising the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this praise comes in the form of him subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is compassionate. And he's stating a fact that if Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's nature was different than what it was, if he wasn't the type of person that he was, he would have long lost all of his followers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding him of this. And he's setting up the verse by stating this first before he says what comes after. And what comes after is a testament to the character of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, so after he praises him, he gives him instructions. So the instructions are that you should forgive in general, but specifically forgive your followers. And we're going to go back a little in a minute. So he says, فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ, and pray for them. Ask for forgiveness for them and uplift them. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, empower them by consulting with them. Uplift them by consulting with them. To better understand this verse, we have to go back a couple of verses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse 152, وَلَقَدْ صَدَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ إِذْ تَحُسُّونَهُمْ بِإِذْنِهِ حَتَّى إِذَا فَشِلْتُمْ وَتَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ وَعَصَيْتُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا أَرَاكُمْ مَا تُحِبُّونَ مِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرِيدُ الدُّنْيَا وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرِيدُ الْآخِرَةَ ثُمَّ صَرَفَكُمْ عَنْهُمْ لِيَبْتَلِيَكُمْ. This verse again, Surah Al-Imran, verse 152. The series of verses were revealed in reference to the Battle of Uhud. And to understand these verses is to understand what happened. Where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the believers specific instructions with regards to their positioning on the battlefield. One of the strategies that he used was to place archers in a strategic position to protect the backs of the believers. And those of you who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed to visit Medina, you may have visited Mount Uhud, and you may have visited again the battlefield, and the Jabal al-Rumah was pointed out to you. So these clear instructions were given to them. The instructions were to the archers: do not abandon your posts regardless of what you may see developing on the battlefield. Under any circumstances, do not abandon your post. Battle ensues. Muslims appear to be victorious. Companions got anxious. They were happy and celebrating, and they left their post. And once they left their post, they were exposed. To understand, the Muslims had the people of Quraysh pinned between the hill where the archers were posted and the mountain. So the believers, their backs were to the hill, to the archers. Once the archers abandoned their post, there was no one there to cover their rear. Companion Khalid ibn al-Walid, who at that time was not Muslim, was part of the army of Quraysh, seized the opportunity, and those of you who are familiar with how that ended, you know how that ended. It did not end well for the Muslims. So the verse 152, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah fulfilled his promise to you. وَلَقَدْ صَدَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ. What is this promise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to? The promise is that you will be victorious as long as you do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you to do. That was a promise. So he went on to say, Allah fulfilled his promise to you. You were routing them with his permission. But then you faltered, you disputed the order, and disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, so they faltered, meaning that once they saw what was going on, and they were overcome with whatever emotions they were overcome with, and they made the decision that, and they started arguing amongst themselves. There were those who were saying that we have clear instructions from the messenger, and there were those who were saying that, well, don't you see what's happening on the battlefield? They're running away, and we need to move. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. And he referred to what happened that day as a failure. So going back to verse 159. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam endured a lot. Anyone who has read the seerah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam understands that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam endured. He did not only endure with his enemies, but he also endured his followers. He endured with his followers. His followers weren't always those individuals who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, or the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, and they always did like that. And this is a clear example in Surah Al-Imran. They had clear instructions. And he tells them, this is an admonishment, he tells them that you failed. You failed to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told you to do. So this was an extremely difficult moment. Extremely difficult moment for the Muslims, and an extremely difficult moment for Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So when you read verse 159, you understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Forgive them their transgression. Because in the previous verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already forgave them. Because they were remorseful. But he told Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Those were the directions. Forgive, pray for them. It takes a tremendous amount of strength. Not only did they suffer severe casualties, Prophet ﷺ was also injured during this battle. And there were rumors circulating that Muhammad ﷺ had perished. There were rumors circulating that Prophet ﷺ had died on the battlefield. So there was a lot of stress. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam these clear instructions. Forgive, pray for, and uplift. Imagine the strength that this takes. This is shortly thereafter. This isn't years have passed. There's all of this space, all of this time between when this occurred and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam his instructions, his walking orders. This is how you should deal with this. He didn't tell them, you need to beat them down. He didn't tell them, those who disobeyed you, take them out back and do what you have to do with them. Forgive, pray for, and uplift. If you look at Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and how he dealt with his adversaries, comes to mind, which is the most pronounced, is his encounter with the people of Ta'if. He goes to Ta'if calling them to Islam. What do? They chase him out of town, stone him. He has to flee for his life, bloodied, confused, hurt, insulted, injured in every way imaginable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Jibreel alayhi salam to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and tells him, give me my orders. What do you want me to do? If you want, I will topple these two mountains on them. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? He forgave and he prayed for them. He did what? He forgave and he prayed for them. Often, brothers and sisters, when we look to emulate Islamic personalities, we often look past Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam when we look at other people. And we forget that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was the example. And everybody else was flawed. We forget that. So instead of comparing, looking at the character of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and comparing ourselves to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we compare ourselves to others. And this is not a slight against anyone else, but they were not Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And his example was the example. And what he did is what we're supposed to try to do. He exercised patience. He was compassionate. He was merciful across the spaces of his life, regardless of who he encountered. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was compassionate to the believers. بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. Yes, absolutely. But regardless of faith, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was compassionate across the spaces of his life. That's how he lived. So regardless of who he encountered or what the fitna was, or who did him wrong, or what relationship he had that was the difficult one, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was always the same way. He was always the same way. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls all of us to. There's a verse in Surah Al-Furqan that I read, and I've been reflecting on this verse for a month. That's how profound this verse is. The verse is from Surah Al-Furqan. Surah Al-Furqan, Surah 25. Surah 25, verse 20. 25, 20. In the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by talking about the messengers and the fact that the messengers were human beings. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send angels to mankind. He did not give the message to people who would lord over their people like that. That the messengers were common people. They were common people. So he said, subhanahu wa ta'ala, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما أرسلنا قبلك من المرسلين إلا إنهم ليأكلون الطعام ويمشون في الأسواق. He says, no messenger have we sent before you who did not eat food and walk in the marketplaces. This is in response to, of course, when Prophet ﷺ went to his people. So if their question was, well, if Allah, God or whoever it is that you're talking about, sent you as a messenger, he couldn't send anybody better than you, somebody with status. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, it had nothing to do with that. It's not about status. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was relatable. And so were all of the messengers. So he started out the verse with that. But the part of the verse that I've been reflecting on is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً. Now, this verse has been translated many ways. So I'm going to read a translation to you. So the translation, one of the translations is, But we have made some of you a means of testing others. To say that some people are tests for others does this verse injustice, and it does injustice to the reality of life. The reality is every relationship that you have, every person that you encounter is a fitna for you. What is the fitna? The fitna is how you engage. Because that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala judges you. How do you engage with other people? The stranger, the co-worker, the neighbor, the person that insults you, the person that praises you, the person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given more than you, the person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given less than you. Across the spaces of your life, these relationships are a source of fitna for you. So then after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً, he asks the question, أَتَصْبِرُونَ, will you be patient? Patience isn't always when someone causes harm to you, insults you, upsets you. That's not the only time when you need to exercise patience, because then you don't understand patience. Patience is includes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you, and you are disciplined enough, and you are patient enough not to squander that. Not to do stupid stuff like you see every day. Allah blesses you. You see people, they win the lottery, and I go out and I got to, blow $300,000 on a car. That's a test. And you didn't exercise patience with that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, that test which was wealth. So every relationship that you have, every person that you encounter, your brother's a fitna for you. Your sister's a fitna for you. Your spouse is a fitna for you. Your children are a fitna for you. Your boss is a fitna for you. Your employees are a fitna for you. The person walking down the street is a fitna for you. Because you're engaging with these people. And when you engage with these people, you have to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what's supposed to guide you. أَتَصْبِرُونَ, will you be patient? وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-seeing, which means that regardless of who you encounter, when you encounter them, if you haven't disciplined yourself to the point where you're the same, you're balanced, you treat everyone equally, you exercise patience whenever you're pushed. And I don't mean physically pushed. When you're tested, do you do those things that the Prophet subhanahu wa ta'ala told Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to do? Forgive, pray for, and uplift. This verse, brothers and sisters, is a tremendous verse, and a verse that we could talk about forever. We could talk about this verse every day, all day, and how this verse applies to every person that you encounter. You may not think it. The stuff the reminders that we give every Friday. And this is real life. Reminder, Fulan, be good to yourself, don't forget yourself. If you encounter something, you encounter somebody. That's your test. When you hear me when I give you the example of you're walking, you're passing, you're traveling, and somebody stops you and says, sir or miss or whatever, can you? That's your test. وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً. You don't know that person, but that is still a fitna for you. أَتَصْبِرُونَ. You can go from example to example to example to example. And if you were to reflect on this verse, you would see it clearly. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this. So what do? What do we do? How do we benefit? How do we apply this to our lives? You know, when you really embrace this verse, a light should come on. And if you're someone who's in the habit of holding him or herself accountable, you will go back and say, you know what? I didn't handle that right. I could have done better here. I cheated myself there. Reflect on this verse, brothers and sisters. Learn from the example of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Learn from his example. These two verses, rather the three verses that I shared with you today, 3:152, 3:159, and 25:20 are verses that are worthy of reflection. And if you venture into Surah Al-Imran, which is one of the longest surahs in the Quran, it's a long read, but it's a beneficial read. And the Battle of Badr, many lessons can be learned from that. One of the most important things that we can learn from that incident, from that event, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us to do something, we need to figure out how to do that. Period. And when you're in the habit of, I'm working on me, there's a Quran as your guide. And as you always hear from this number, if you're not engaging with the Quran, Shaitan is your guide. I don't care who the book is authored by. Shaitan is your guide. There's everything that you need in order for you to be a successful human being, a successful Muslim, is in the Quran. And often, verses we encounter and we read by them. We read by them. I'm going to tell you, Surah Al-Furqan is a surah that I've read thousands of times, which means that I've read this verse thousands of times. Which means that when you reflect on the Quran, when you engage with the Quran, stuff comes to you all the time. It just so happens that a good 42 years later, verse 20 came to me. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works. Engage with his book. If you're lost by 42 years later, I started studying the Quran when I was 6 years old. So 42 years later, that verse came to me. And I can go and I can tell you about verses that came to me years later. And this is not, I'm going to the Quran every once in a while. No, I'm reading the Quran pretty much every day. But if you're not engaging with the book, if you're looking for that awakening, we'll call it an awakening, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals something to you. If you're not engaging with the Quran, it's not going to happen for you. It's not going to, I don't care again. And this is fact. Or as some of us like to say, haqq. وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His book, in the Quran. And say, O Muhammad, that the truth is from your Lord. The truth is in the Quran. So if you're everywhere else looking for truth, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Because everybody, as you well know, everybody has a truth. And verse 20 is applicable as well when we're talking about truth. وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً. So when you ignore what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says and you're conflicted because Sheikh Fulan said, Allah said, it is what it is. Allah said. Engage with Allah's love. If you want to be like someone, be like Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If you want to compare yourself, if you want to look at, measure where you are, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is a measure. Stop looking for yourself in someone else other than Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that you may share. I'm a tough guy, so I want to be like Umar. No, you want to be like Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was tough also. But Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was, as Aisha radiallahu anha described him, when they asked her about his character, and she said, what? كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him wasn't given to everyone else. And this isn't a slight. When I make these remarks, this is not a slight against any of the companions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with all of them. It's not a slight against them. This is fact in reality. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They were his followers. They looked to him as the example, as we should. We have to get out of the business of looking past him. Because often we look past Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and we look at everybody else. And and that's fact, and we can have lengthy conversations about that. About how Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam engaged with others. But then Sheikh Fulan said in this book, and then we're going to go with what Sheikh Fulan said. No. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi, this is how he engaged with people. This is what he did. This is what he did. This is how he lived. He's the example. His sunnah is the sunnah that we follow. And if what anybody does is not aligned with what Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did or how he lived, it's our duty to follow Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and whoever did whatever they did, that's between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those marching orders that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in Surah Al-Imran, embrace those. Embrace forgiveness. Those who you disagree with, pray for them. Those who hurt you, pray for them. Those you get negative energy from, pray for them. Don't hold on to stuff. Don't let whatever it is, whatever emotions you're struggling with, come between you and your reward, your ajr, you being a better person, a better Muslim. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to yourself. That does not benefit you. You holding on to stuff, well, I'm getting this negative energy from you, so I'm going to, no, you're not. You need to stop that person, tell that person, as the young people say, go sit in the corner, go have a seat in the corner. That's you keeping yourself in check. That's your struggle. We have enough work to do right here to keep us preoccupied until we die. If we only realize that. See, and that's the awakening. And that awakening, because when you engage with the Quran, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. Fulan, become a better person. Fulan, keep yourself in check. Don't do these things that harm you. Don't harm other people, because harming other people harms you. All the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you not to do are things that He's protecting you from. Stop fighting with it. وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً. I really want you to reflect on this verse. Because something that I may say today may be a fitna for you. I'm struggling, wrestling with that. Oh my God, I don't know. Go to the Quran and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you an awakening. Ask Him to open your eyes. فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. The last thing He said, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Uplift, build up. Don't tear people down because I had a disagreement with you, so I got to cross all kind of boundaries. I had to call you everything. I don't want to have nothing to do with you. That's, all of that is shaitan. And I'm going to tell you, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if he was some other type of person, when they disobeyed him and they suffered the way they suffered, and he was injured the way he was injured, I want you to think about that. His response wasn't, he didn't beat them down. He didn't tell them all of what they didn't do. He didn't do any of that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him what? فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. That's what He told him to do. And that's what Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did. And it was easy for him to do that because that's who he was. We need to work on being more like that. We need to work on being more like Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات من كل ذنب واستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على نبي الكريم وبعد. Brothers and sisters, in closing, as always, be good to yourself. Be good to yourself. Be good to yourself. And by now, you know what that means. I don't have to explain that to you. When I say I don't have to explain that to you, I don't have to tell you what I mean by that. Be good to you. We do enough harm to ourselves. We need to do the work of figuring out how not to keep stepping on our own toes. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us with that. And do the things that will help us become better people. And help yourself by engaging with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book. I refer you today to 3 verses. If you have the time today, please refer to them. And if you can't muster those 3 verses, that's too much of a challenge for you. If you're only to reflect on 1 verse, please go to Surah Al-Furqan, Surah 25, verse 20. Please. That 1 verse will change your life. That 1 verse will change your life. You will see life in that verse. And if you read it and you're not getting it, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enlighten you. Because it's clear. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He forgives us all on this blessed day of Jum'ah, that He accepts from us all on this blessed day of Jum'ah. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وإمام المتقين فقد أمركم الله بذلك في كتاب العزيز فقال جل من قائل إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروا الله العظيم الجليل يذكركم واشكروه على نعمه يزدكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون وأقيموا الصلاة فإن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر